Thank you for that song, wherever you went, wherever you are, back there. Yeah. Alex, Kathy. Kathy does a great Joni Mitchell, too, don't you? The apostles gathered around Jesus in our gospel and shared all of their stories about what happened when they went out 2 by 2 to minister. Jesus said at that time, let's go to a deserted place to debrief, to get some R&R time. In the Bible, the desert is a place of intimacy with God, a time of learning and formation. John the Baptist went there, Jesus went there, St. Paul went there after his Damascus conversion. He went to the Arabian desert. In ancient times, people would leave the city and go to the desert to find God, like the church fathers and mothers, people like Anthony of the Desert, Mother Cynthia the Wise, Gregory of Nyssa, John the Solitary, Dora the Explorer, all of them. They forged an intimate, trusting relationship with God in the desert. And they called the desert the laboratory of the Spirit. The desert, Hermos in the Greek, which is where we get the word hermit, one who dwells in a deserted place. Of course, the people in the gospel story guessed where Jesus and his disciples were going. And they ran on ahead, and they arrived ahead of them. And when Jesus stepped ashore, he saw this great crowd waiting for him. And he had compassion on them, or for them. Anyone else would have been intensely annoyed. Did Jesus ever roll his eyes and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. I only exist when you want something"? Did he ever turn away and say, "I'd like to cancel my subscription to your issues"? Apparently not. Because Jesus realized that they wanted so much what he alone could give them. St. Augustine, in his autobiography, Confessions, put it this way: "You, O God, have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find you." This restlessness has always been present with me, even though I'm sure I've annoyed Jesus many times and made him roll his eyes once or twice. We are meaning-seeking creatures. And when we no longer find value or significance, we fall into despair. That's because we're made in the image of God. We were made with a space within us, a God-shaped space, so to speak, a void that can only be filled by the Spirit. That's God's image, eternity in our hearts, the innate desire for our reach to exceed our grasp, or what's a heaven for? Cats, as far as we know, don't lay around having existential angst about the feline condition. Dogs don't lay around pondering if they're going to make it into heaven or not, except for our dog, Sarah, of course, who will surely make it into heaven. Not like our other border collie that we used to have, whose name was Gehenna, which was the Greek word for hell. Then there's our dog, our current dog, our Aussie, Beelzebub, but I won't go there. Monkeys don't draw pictures on cave walls. Only we humans wrestle with such issues. Only we feel that restlessness, driven to search and to ask and to wonder and to know when we're lost and when we're alone, when we feel deserted or afraid. Which takes us to the 23rd Psalm. "And the Lord is my shepherd." Very famous psalm. Everybody knows about the 23rd Psalm. It's an old, ancient song, 3,000 years old, about a guy who trusts God like a sheep trusts a shepherd. One of my favorite Far Side cartoons shows a couple of intellectual sheep. And they're they're smoking cigarettes, and one's leaning against a city lamppost, and they're on this corner, and they're watching all the other sheep, and they're driving in their cars in heavy traffic. And the one sheep says to the other, "We all, like people, have gone astray." I guess it's all relative. If we can briefly look at the picture this psalm paints, we will see it is in the deserted places, the dark valleys, that we learn God is with us. Recently, I've been pondering and thinking about and confronted with 3 deaths. The details aren't important. One was of an old friend, one was of a child, and the third was the anniversary of the loss of my own family 20-some years ago. And I wasn't depressed or anything like that. I was just thinking a lot about all these deaths, and of course the news didn't help, and death. So incidentally, it's really cool at our house. The butterflies are starting to hatch. So all this week, as I've been thinking about that, I've seen butterflies circling and fluttering about the yard. It's like the tiger swallowtail that we saw yesterday. Our life is full of metaphors. We just have to look for them. Anyway, confronted with all these deaths, when we are like a sudden death or a tragedy, life can seem unfair. And maybe you've dealt with that, maybe you're dealing with it now. But it really begs the question, who said life is supposed to be fair? God never promised life would be fair. What God did promise is when it is our turn to confront the unfairness of life, no matter how difficult it is to go through, God will be with you, on your side, so to speak. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. The writer of the psalm is not saying, I will fear no evil because there's no such thing as evil in the world and everything happens for a reason. He's not saying, I will fear no evil because only bad things happen to bad people and they deserve them. The writer of the 23rd Psalm is saying, this is a crazy, scary, sometimes out of control world, but I'm confident that God is with me. God is on my side. Not on the side of the tragedy, not on the side of violence, not on the side of illness, not on the side of addiction or the poverty or the fear or the accident or the terrible thing that happened. And that's enough to give me confidence. The psalmist started out living in a perfect world, as you notice that in the booklet. Green pastures and still waters, it says. Great fishing, I'm sure of it. And Snapple peach iced tea for everybody. And Fig Newmans, which are like Fig Newtons, only they're organic. Try them if you haven't already. But then something happens to the writer. We don't know what it is. Maybe he got sick. Maybe somebody he loved died. And then he's cast. He's cast away from the John Denver world of sunshine on my shoulders makes me happy into the valley of the shadow of death. Shadows. Nothing seems real anymore, just shadows. Did God abandon the ancient writer? Had God forgotten him? No. The Lord is still my shepherd, he proclaims, especially in the valley, especially in this deserted place. It is there where, like the writer, we realize that God is with me, where we learn what God is all about, where courage and strength are born within us to get us through. It's where we find ourselves and where we find the reality of God. A real God, not a fluffy God of praise choruses or prosperity gospels or feel-good theology. Some people get stuck in the valley of the shadow of death and they don't know how to find their way out. And the role of God is not to explain or to justify what's happening, but to comfort them. And to find people where they are in the darkness and take them by the hand and show them how to live again. And our role is to pray and to help God help them. And we have this promise of our shepherd that reconciled with our loved ones, we will dwell with the Lord forever, which is a very long time, by the way. We see this every time we go to Masonville on the fourth Sunday of the month, which incidentally is today. So if you'd like to come along, see me after the service. We sing a little bit and we have a little service there, and then somebody reads the 23rd Psalm, the well-known psalm. And you look up as someone's reading the psalm, and you can see those gray-haired folks, some 90, some 100 years old, wrinkled, weathered faces, bent bodies. They're mouthing the words to this psalm, the 23rd Psalm, by memory. And their eyes are fixed. You can see it. Their hearts are a mile away, perhaps thinking of a spouse or a child who has passed before them. Their old souls are still restless to dwell with the Lord. And to me, it's like hearing Antonio Vivaldi's Gloria. It is sacred. In excelsis Deo. And you realize many may know the 23rd Psalm, but these worn and weary pilgrims before us, they know the shepherd. Amen.